Picture this. On the very same morning, in 12 different regions across Israel, 12 men each open a package that has just arrived at their door. Not gold, not a letter. 12 pieces of the same woman's body. Sounds like the opening of a horror film, doesn't it? But this actually happened, recorded in the Bible itself. In the book of Judges, chapters 19 through 21. And the most haunting part of this story isn't that her body was cut into 12 pieces. It's who did the cutting: her own husband. The same man who, the night before, while his wife was being gang-raped by a mob outside the door all night long, chose to go back inside and go to sleep. If you've heard this story before, chances are you only know half of it. Most people stop at chapter 19, never realizing that chapters 20 and 21 hold details just as disturbing and arguably even more lessons to take away. Before we go any further, I need to be upfront. This may be the most disturbing story in the entire Bible. It's not appropriate for children, and if you're carrying any kind of trauma from your past, this story could bring it back up. Please keep that in mind before continuing. In this video, I'm going to tell the story as vividly and dramatically as I can. Then, we'll walk through the lessons I believe every one of us needs to take from a story this painful. Sexual violence, brutal murder, bloody civil war. Judges 19, the Bible's darkest scandal. This is a time when Israel has no king, no central authority, no one to enforce justice. Everyone does whatever seems right in their own eyes. It's inside that chaos that our story unfolds. Our first character, a Levite man, living deep in the hill country of Ephraim, in northern Israel. He takes a concubine, a secondary wife from Bethlehem, down south in Judah. Days of travel apart, in a world with no roads to speak of, no way to send word ahead. A woman who leaves her home entirely to live with a man in a land she's never known. Then one day, she leaves him, goes back to her father's house in Bethlehem. The text says she was unfaithful to him. But here's something most people don't know. One of the oldest surviving versions of the Old Testament, the Greek Septuagint, doesn't say that at all. It says she became angry with him. We'll never know for certain what really happened between them. What we do know is she stayed at her father's house for 4 months. 4 months later, the husband decides to go get her back. He travels south to his father-in-law's house, and there he meets a man who is remarkably hospitable, almost too hospitable. Day one, he says, "I need to leave." The father says, "Stay one more night. Eat, enjoy yourself." He stays. It happens again and again. If you were that Levite, sitting through 5 days of feasting and delay, would you have noticed anything was off? None of them could have known that every extra hour they lingered that week was quietly pushing them toward a night. None of them could have imagined. On the 5th day, he finally insists on leaving, but too late in the day. To get far, they set out as the sun is already dropping. The husband, the concubine, a servant, 2 donkeys. Not far into the journey, they reach the outskirts of Gibeah, a Jebusite city, never conquered by Israel. This city gets a new name later. You know it as Jerusalem. The servant suggests they stop there for the night. The husband refuses. "No, this is a foreign city. We push on to our own people." Put yourself in his place for a second. Would you have made the same call, pressing on in the dark, betting that your own countrymen would be safer than strangers? He has no idea that this safe decision is about to lead his family into something far worse than any foreign city could have been. The sun is fully down by the time they reach Gibeah, territory of the tribe of Benjamin. They sit in the town square and wait. In this culture, hospitality wasn't just a nicety, it was close to sacred law. Anyone passing through an Israelite town at dusk could expect a door to open for them. That night in Gibeah, not a single one did. Can you imagine that feeling? Sitting in an open square in a strange town, night fully fallen, and every house around you choosing to look away. Finally, an old man walks in from working the fields. Worth noting, he isn't even a native of Benjamin. He's an Ephraimite himself, just living in Gibeah. Maybe that's exactly why he's the only one who stops. "Come stay with me," he says. "Don't spend the night out here." Dinner has barely started when, outside, the noise begins. A mob of men from the town surrounds the house, pounding on the door. "Bring out the man in your house," they shout. "We want to rape him." If that sounds familiar, it should. It's almost word for word what happens in Genesis 19. In Sodom, a mob surrounding Lot's house, demanding he hand over his 2 guests for the exact same reason. That's not a coincidence. It's exactly the point the author of Judges wants you to sit with. This is Israel now. Inside the borders of God's own people, in a town belonging to God's own tribe, this town is acting exactly like Sodom, the city that got wiped off the map for this same sin. The old man steps outside, begging them to stop. "Don't do this evil thing, my brothers. This man is my guest. Look, I have a virgin daughter, and he has his concubine. Take them. Do whatever you want with them. Just don't do this to him." Sit with that for a second. In their world, the safety of a male guest, a man they'd known for a few hours, mattered more than a daughter's body, more than a wife's. That was the code they lived by, and it's about to cost a woman her life. The mob won't listen, and the man who should have protected her more than anyone, her own husband, does the last thing you'd expect. He grabs her, pushes her out the door, into the dark, toward the men waiting outside. Then he turns back inside and shuts the door behind him. No one comes to save her that night. No law steps in. Scripture gives us only one sentence for what happens next, and it's enough to haunt anyone who reads it. They raped her, again and again.
Help me.
All night,
Please.
until the skies started to lighten. Do you think the man sitting inside that house slept, knowing exactly what was happening a few feet from where he lay? Just before sunrise, they finally let her go. No one walks her back. She drags herself through the fading dark, back to the house where her husband is staying, and she collapses right at the door. Her hands reach up, resting on the threshold. One last thing her body could still do. She stops there, right at the edge of the doorway, unable to go one step further. The next morning, the husband gets up like it's any other day, opens the door, ready to head out. And there she is, lying at the threshold, hands still resting on the doorframe. "Get up," he says. "Let's go." Nothing. Not because she can't hear him, because she's no longer able to answer at all. And up to this exact moment, Scripture has never once given her a name. From the first line of this story to now, she's only ever the concubine, a woman who dies in silence, on the doorstep of a house that was never hers. The husband lifts her body onto the donkey, the same way you'd load luggage, and sets off for home. But this trip home is nowhere near over, because what he does the moment he walks through his own front door is about to turn this story into one of the most disturbing chapters in the entire Bible. He carries her body through the front door of his own house, and instead of burying her, instead of mourning her, he reaches for a knife. The text gives us one unflinching sentence for what happens next. He takes hold of her, this woman whose name Scripture still hasn't told us, even now, and limb by limb, cuts her into 12 pieces. Then something even stranger. He wraps each piece separately, ties a message to it, and sends the 12 pieces out in 12 directions, one for every tribe of Israel. One travels north, back to his own people in Ephraim. One travels south, back to Bethlehem, back to the very house where her father once begged him to stay just one more night. One reaches the coast. One reaches the far edge of the land. This is the moment this video opened, with 12 men, 12 packages, arriving the same morning. Now you know what was inside. Picture receiving one. You're a tribal leader somewhere in Israel, going about an ordinary day, when a stranger arrives at your door holding something wrapped in cloth. You open it. Tied to it is a message telling you exactly what happened to this woman, and exactly who did it. Not raiders, not foreigners. Your own people, the tribe of Benjamin. Every tribe that opens their package reacts with almost the same words. Nothing like this has ever happened. Not once. Not since the day we walked out of Egypt. Not the plagues. Not 40 years in the wilderness. Not any war since. Nothing in their history compares. The message attached to each piece was short. Think about it. Talk it over. Then tell us what should be done. So they do. All 11 tribes, every one but Benjamin, gather as a single army, hundreds of thousands of armed men, to decide. Their demand is simple. Hand over the men of Gibeah, the ones responsible, so we can put them to death. And this ends here. Benjamin's answer is no. And just like that, Israel goes to war with itself. 12 tribes that once crossed a wilderness together, now standing on opposite sides of a battlefield, because 11 of them refuse to let this go unanswered, and one refuses to hand over its own. If you were standing in those ranks, watching the tribe camped next to yours become the enemy overnight, would you still believe this was the only way? Or would some part of you already sense this was about to spiral past anyone's control? Here's a detail. Most retellings skip. Israel doesn't win easily. Benjamin's army is smaller, but it includes 700 elite fighters left-handed, famous for being able to sling a stone at a target the width of a hair and never miss. Israel attacks twice. Twice. They're driven back 22,000 dead the first time, 18,000 more the second. 40,000 Israelite soldiers dead, and Benjamin is still standing. It takes a third assault and an ambush to finally break them. What follows isn't just a defeat. It's closer to annihilation. Benjamite towns are burned to the ground, Gibeah included, the very town where all of this started. By the time it's over, only 600 Benjamite men remain alive in the entire tribe, and they survive only by fleeing into the wilderness and hiding inside a rock for 4 months. Try to sit with that. Your entire tribe, everyone you grew up with, your whole world reduced to 600 men hiding in a cave, with no idea whether the rest of Israel is coming to finish what it started. They're not. Something shifts. The other 11 tribes look at what's left of Benjamin, and grief turns into something else: fear. Fear that one of the 12 tribes of Israel, one of the 12 sons of Jacob himself, is about to disappear from the earth. 600 men. No wives. No way to rebuild. In 1 generation, Benjamin is gone. So now they have a new problem, and solving it is going to take another decision, nearly as disturbing as the one that started this whole tragedy. Here's the complication. Before the war, in that same assembly, all 11 tribes had sworn an oath before God. No one would ever give a daughter in marriage to a man of Benjamin. Not one father from any tribe would break that vow. So how do you rebuild a tribe from nothing when you've already sworn you'll never provide the one thing it needs to survive? Someone remembers something. When the tribes gathered to make that oath, one town never showed up. Jabesh Gilead. And at that same assembly, they'd sworn a second oath, that any town that didn't send men to stand with them would be destroyed. You can probably already see where this is going, and it's worth pausing on. One hasty oath is already forcing their hand into a second decision, just as devastating. 12,000 soldiers march on Jabesh Gilead. They kill every man. They kill every woman who isn't a virgin. What's left, 400 young unmarried women, are marched back to the camp and handed over to the surviving men of Benjamin as wives. Do the math for a second. 600 men, 400 women. That still leaves 200 men from Benjamin, with no wife, no way to continue their family line, and Israel has now run out of oaths. It's willing to break. So the elders come up with one more plan. There's a yearly festival at Shiloh, where the young unmarried women come out to dance among the vineyards. The elders tell the 200 remaining Benjamite men exactly what to do. Hide among the vines. Wait for the dancing to begin. And when it does, each man is to grab a woman for himself and carry her back to Benjamin. Here's the reasoning, spoken out loud and recorded in the text itself. If any father complains, tell him this: you didn't give your daughter to Benjamin. She was taken. No oath was broken. 200 men hide in the vineyards. The festival begins. The dancing starts, and 200 women are seized mid-celebration and carried off to become wives to men they've never met, in a tribe their own fathers had sworn they'd never marry them in. If you were one of those fathers, standing there as your daughter was carried into the dark, and someone leaned in to tell you it was fine technically, you never gave your permission, would that have made it any easier to watch? With that, Benjamin has its wives. The men go home, rebuild what was burned, and start over, and the rest of Israel goes home too, every tribe back to its own land, its own inheritance, as if the fires, the 40,000 dead, the massacre at Jabesh Gilead, and the ambush at Shiloh could simply be folded up and left behind them. The very last line of the book of Judges reads like this: In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did whatever seemed right in their own eyes. That's the whole story, from a wedding gone wrong in Bethlehem, to a doorstep in Gibeah, to 12 villages holding 12 pieces of the same woman, to a war that nearly erased an entire tribe from history. Now here's what I think we're actually meant to walk away with. The first lesson is this: when nobody holds you accountable, you drift. Go back to the very first line of this story. In the days when there was no king in Israel. Notice, that's almost word for word. The last line of the book too. The whole horror we just walked through is bookended by that sentence. That's the author telling you what caused all of this. And you don't need an ancient monarchy to feel this today. It's the incognito tab. The DM nobody else can see. The business trip where nobody from home is watching. The meeting nobody minutes. The decision made behind a closed door. Every one of us has our own version of Gibeah at night. A place where we quietly assume no one's checking. The question isn't whether you'll ever be in a room with no king in it. You already are, regularly. The question is who you are in that room. The second lesson: treat every human being in front of you as someone carrying the image of God. Remember the old man's logic that night: don't touch this man. But here, take my daughter, take his concubine. In his mind, a stranger's dignity outweighed his own daughter's body. That same math still runs quietly today, just on a screen instead of a doorstep. A dating app that turns a person into a profile you swipe past. A video that turns someone's daughter into content. Behind a lot of what plays on a screen is a real person with a name, a family, a story, and in plenty of cases, a real industry built on real exploitation and real trafficking. If you're someone who struggles with what you look at, try this test. Would you want someone looking at your daughter, your sister, the way you're about to look at her? Here's the third thing I want you to notice. The farther you drift from God, the more capable you become of things you never thought you'd do. Zoom out and look at the whole book of Judges, not just these 3 chapters. What you're watching is a slow generational drift, a nation moving further from God, one small compromise at a time. Nobody wakes up one morning and decides to destroy their marriage or gut their own integrity. It's the extra hour on your phone instead of 5 minutes in prayer. The white lie that becomes a habit. The boundary you moved, just this, once that quietly becomes the new normal. 10 years ago you'd have sworn, "There's no way I'd let my faith go this cold. There's no way I'd become the parent who's never really present. There's no way I'd end up here." Drift never announces itself. It just adds up until the unthinkable starts to look negotiable. This leads to the 4th lesson. You get to choose your sin. You don't get to choose its consequences. Look at how many people in this story were destroyed by decisions they didn't even make. That's not just an ancient problem. A leader's one bad call can cost hundreds of employees their jobs or their pensions. A parent's addiction can shape how their kids see themselves for the next 30 years. And notice the second bad decision Israel made trying to patch the first one. The technically we never broke our oath logic at Shiloh, where they engineered a loophole to feel innocent about real harm. That logic is still alive. I didn't lie. I just didn't say everything. We didn't let her go for that reason officially. Technically true. Still, a person left carrying the damage. And the 5th and final lesson, grace shows up. Even in the wreckage we built ourselves. Benjamin should have ended that year. 600 men, no wives, no future. It survived not because it earned that, but because grace showed up in the middle of a story made entirely of bad decisions. That's still true now. It's the person rebuilding after addiction, after prison, after the affair, the bankruptcy, the year they're most ashamed of. Grace doesn't erase what it cost. Benjamin still buried its dead, and your consequences will still show up the same way. But grace does mean the story isn't required to end at rock bottom. One more thing, before you go. Gibeah, the town where all of this happened, doesn't disappear from the story. After chapter 21, generations later, Israel finally gets the thing it had been missing this entire book, a king. And that first king, the man the whole nation begged God for, comes from Gibeah. Scripture even starts calling the town Gibeah of Saul, his hometown, his name now stitched permanently onto it. Sit with that for a second. The last line of Judges reads almost like a complaint. There was no king, so everyone did whatever felt right in their own eyes. And the answer to that complaint, the first king of Israel rises out of the exact same ground where a woman was thrown into the dark and left to die. Coincidence? Maybe. But it reads like the writer wants you to notice it. Here's the second twist, and it might be the more remarkable one. The tribe of Benjamin, the tribe that nearly ceased to exist in this story, down to 600 men hiding in a rock in the wilderness, doesn't just survive, it goes on to matter. Centuries later, the entire Jewish people face a different death sentence, this one written into law by a Persian empire. In the book of Esther, the man God uses to save them, the one who refuses to bow, the one who gets word to the queen in time, his name is Mordecai. Esther chapter 2 tells you exactly where he's from, the tribe of Benjamin. And centuries after that, in the New Testament, a man stands up and says, by name, I am of the tribe of Benjamin. His name is Paul, the man traditionally credited with writing 13 of the New Testament's books. A tribe that was one battle away from vanishing from history forever, not because it deserved a second chance, but because grace refused to let it end, goes on to produce the man who saves the Jewish people from genocide, and the man who carries the gospel across the entire known world. That's the lesson, hiding underneath the lesson. Grace doesn't just cover the worst chapter of your story and move on. Sometimes, generations later, it takes the very thing that almost destroyed you and uses it to save someone else entirely. A woman who was never even given a name in this story ends up shaping a king, a rescue, and eventually the man who carried this same faith across the known world, not because she or her tribe deserved it, because Grace kept writing long after the worst chapter ended. That's true in this story. I believe it's true in yours too. Maybe your own no king in Israel moments aren't ones you're proud of, decisions made when nobody was watching, a drift you didn't notice until you were standing somewhere you once swore you'd never be. If you take one thing from this video, let it be this: your story doesn't have to end on its worst chapter either. If this video meant something to you, hit like and subscribe if you haven't yet. It genuinely helps this channel keep telling stories like this one. And I'd love to know, out of the 5 lessons, which one hit closest to home for you? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone. If someone in your life needs to hear this story, or needs reminding that grace still reaches into the wreckage, send it their way. Thank you for staying with me through something this heavy, all the way to the end. It wasn't an easy story to tell, and I know it wasn't an easy one to watch. But I believe Scripture holds on to stories like this for a reason, not to shock us and move on, but to show us exactly how far grace is willing to go. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, God bless you.